Okay, then just I am moving to other question. Question is, are Ramayana and Mahabharata the pieces of history or otherwise? Oh, my friends, very interesting question. Really, you have posed a very interesting question to me. Right from the very beginning, I have started to teach history. At various times, I have faced this question. Sometimes even to the displeasure of my students, because some of the students are so much adamant in their, you can say, ideas and perception. No, Ramayana and Mahabharata can never be dismissed as, you can say, simply mythology. They are really history and they represented the early history of India. They cannot bear the shock, no, these are not the pieces of history. In nutshell, I can say, if someone is going to ask you on whose basis you will dismiss Ramayana and Mahabharata as the pieces of history, you will simply reply his question. The history is the proven past and mythology is unproven past. Means the past we cannot prove. Mythology can exist in our consciousness. They can, just like the hearsay, just like the popular perception, just like our cultural faith, mythology can exist, and the people are having the reverence, respect, the greater respect for mythology. But for being the part of history, they have to cross and they have to qualify some criteria. Criteria is the scientific evidence. If on the basis of scientific evidence you are going to prove it, yes, really this event has taken place, so much so Ramayana has occurred during this period, the character Lord Ram was born at this period, Dasharatha existed this period, and from various sources we are going to prove it. Ramayana and Mahabharata, the great epics, like Iliad and Odyssey, and really they are, you can say, older than Iliad and Odyssey and any other, you can say, epics. But after all, they are epics. And characters are imaginary, events are imaginary. What about Mahabharata? So, Romila Thapar has used the term Itihas Purana. Itihas Purana means in our tradition, Mahabharata is called Itihas, simply Itihas, because Mahabharata states about the events and Ramayana as Kavya, Mahabharata as epic, Mahabharata as history. But it was not a pure piece of history. Pure piece of history is that today you find history. These are the pure piece of history, because you are having the two different sorts of evidences. Now even the domain of evidence has largely expanded, particularly after the development of satellite, use of satellite, you can say, the electronics instruments, the chemical instruments, etc. And these days even DNA footprinting. But normally there are the two types of evidence, literary evidence and archaeological evidence. Through juxtaposing the evidence through each other, or through juxtaposing evidence by each other, we can prove that this incident has taken place or not. The political leaders recently have raised this issue and made this issue very controversial, and in popular perception, now Ramayana and Mahabharata sometime even came to be believed as the pieces of history, but they are not the pieces of history. One more thing you should know, being the student of history. Although Ramayana and Mahabharata are not the pieces of history in themselves, but it is equally true that they can work as the source of history. The great epics are supposed to be the source of history for the study of the period of post-Maurya to Guptas. And what is the basis behind that? Up here you can cite the example of the story of Ramayana and Mahabharata. According to our legend, Ramayana is supposed to have occurred much earlier than Mahabharata. In one sense, you can take Mahabharata as the sequel to Ramayana, definitely. But from the perspective of historian, you are going to use Ramayana and Mahabharata as the source material. Then you will come to realize that at least Ramayana was supposed to have compiled earlier than not vice versa. Mahabharata is supposed to have compiled earlier than Ramayana. Why? So historians just come to believe that Mahabharata represented a society or a culture that should be tribal in nature, while Ramayana an agrarian society. And you are having the knowledge of history, tribal society, from tribal society to agrarian society, it might have taken place 400 to 500 years. The first is the tribal society, then agrarian society. As my student, I have informed you, in tribal society, the position of women is better than what you find in agrarian society. Romila Thapar has given a very interesting statement. It is an irony in history. Agriculture has been invented by women. When the male members of the family, they were moving for either hunting or domesticating the animals, or you can say for grazing the animals. At that time, women were alone at the home, and in order to have the time pass, they used to sow some seeds, and out of the seeds, the plants were coming forth. So in this way, the agriculture was invented. But unfortunately, once the agrarian practices based on plowshare started, women were the great losers because they could not participate in agrarian practices. So their economic importance declined in society, and coincidentally, it led to even the decline in their social position. So that's why in an agrarian society, the women character are not normally so much powerful as you find in a tribal society. In the epic of Mahabharata, you will find a very powerful character like Draupadi. The 2 and 3 evidences you can cite on whose basis you can prove it a tribal society. The first thing, Draupadi is supposed to have 5 husbands, means it is the classical example of polyandry. And this polyandry was permissible in a tribal society, not an agrarian society. And secondly, Draupadi was a powerful character. She was strong enough to bear all the sorts of humiliation meted to her in Duryodhana court, and even during this critical juncture, she might have the strength to take the oath publicly. I will never wash this hair till I will wash it first with the blood of Dushasana. Can you imagine such a strong, or you can say such a strong faith she was having in her, you can say in her husband, or you can say in any sort of in her personality, And on the other hand, you will find that Sita was not such a powerful character from one point of view. She was having the great sacrifices for her near and dear, for her kith and kin, relatives, etc. Right from the very beginning, she has made so many sacrifices. But she could not be compared with Draupadi, Even up to the last, in the beginning, she has sacrificed for her, you can say, Maike, or for the mother's family or father's family. Then she is moving to Ayodhya, and even as a bride, she has to face so many vicissitudes right from the very beginning. You can say, just extradition to forest, Then finally, she was captured by Ravana. When she returned from this Ram-Ravana war to Ayodhya, and when there was a time of peace for her, even that time she has to face a social blot, and finally she has to prove her, you can say, she was supposed to prove her sacredness or piousness. So really she has suffered a lot. But Draupadi was quite different. So on this basis, now historians believe that the Ramayana might have compiled after Mahabharata, and Mahabharata represented the socio-cultural relations of a tribal society, while Ramayana of agrarian society. So Mahabharata might have compiled in the region of either northwest or upper Gangetic basin, and Ramayana in middle Gangetic basin. So this is the difference between the two. So my students, now you have to come to this point that Ramayana and Mahabharata in themselves cannot be proved as the pieces of history, because we are not having either the archaeological or literary evidence to prove it. But it is equally true that Ramayana and Mahabharata can be used as the sources of history. They might have been compiled in the 1 millennium, means 1000 years, and they work as the source of a study or the source of a study for history during post-Maurya period and Gupta period. So in this way you can say that Ramayana and Mahabharata are not themselves the pieces of history, but they are the great sources of history today. Okay, thank you. I am just moving to other question.
ऑनलाइन रिकॉर्डेड कोर्स का संचालन हमारे एप्लीकेशन द स्टडी बाय मणिकांत सिंह पर किया जाता है। एप्लीकेशन को डाउनलोड करने का लिंक वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन में दे दिया गया है। अधिक जानकारी के लिए स्क्रीन पे दिए गए फोन नंबर पर हमसे संपर्क करें या हमारे YouTube चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें। थैंक यू।